be on Introduction to Data Analytics. It will be handled by Mrs. Usha Venkata Subramanian. I request Ms. Rajeshwari to introduce our resource person.
I'm happy to introduce our resource person, Mrs. Usha Venkata Subramanian, to the gathering. Mrs. Usha Venkata Subramanian currently heads the Data and Analytic Practice and Digital Solution for Emerging Markets at L&T Infotech. She holds a master degree from MIT Madras and started her career as a lecturer in computer engineering at IRTT. She worked in Middle East as a consultant, delivering data warehouse solution for ministries of Kuwait and UAE. Now, with over 30 years of IT experience, she consults on areas like data on cloud, big data, data management, business intelligence, and IoT initiatives of global organizations in different sectors. She has collaborated with various partners such as Tableau, QLIC, Informatica, Microsoft, IBM, and SAS. At L&T Infotech, she has set up data analytic practice for India, Middle East, and many other Asia Pacific countries. She leads various prestigious transformational programs of Digital India with government organizations. She has received the Women in L&T Infotech Leadership Award in the year 2017 for a contribution to business growth and strategies. I thank her for providing a gracious present to join us today. I invite our resource person, Mrs. Usha Venkata Subramanian, to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. As introduced, this session is about introduction to data analytics. I believe this is the first step towards getting into the visualization area or getting to learn Tableau as a data visualization tool. This session will paint a broader picture in terms of what visualization tools can do and where will the data lie for such visualization tools. So it will be a concept session that we will have. I'll be sharing my screen now. Are you able to see the PowerPoint playing?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the agenda will comprise of 3 parts. I hope you are able to see the agenda slide as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the agenda will comprise of 3 parts. We will start with certain definitions because all of you are from academic background. So it is good to have certain definitions like, what is a data-driven organization? What are its characteristics? Or what is the importance? Why are we going through this topic? Those kind of things in the first agenda part. The second part of the agenda comprises of practical examples of data analytics in various industries. I have picked up 5 different industries which are in common place. We see them daily in our daily lives, so it will be easy to correlate and understand. And then third part, we will conclude with what are the best practices, what kind of architecture should be set up for a data analytics solution. So that's how it is divided into 3 parts. And alongside, while I'm talking about the practical examples, I will be talking about certain data analytics or visualization tools like Tableau. I'll be mentioning some of them. I'll also be talking about various types of visualization widgets that will be that are typically used in various development of dashboards and reports. So let's get into the details one by one. Also, for the sake of bandwidth, I'm going to switch off my video. All right. So the first agenda item is the data-driven organization and the characteristics, right? Now, when we look at any organization, be it academic organizations like yours, or even if you look at any kind of any other type of organization, there is a lot of data that is available, right? In the academic situation, there is data about students, there is data about faculty, there is data about courses, there is data about the library facilities, the books available in the library, or even the digital books and all, if your library is digitized, and then the various classrooms, labs, and different arrangements that are there in the within the academic organization. So there is data available in every one of them, right? How do I treat that data as an enterprise asset? So that is a key question that any data-driven organization would start with. For example, if I take a student who is studying in course A, and taught by faculty X, goes and refers to the library for a certain type of book, then and then at the end of the academic year, maybe he scores very good marks. Then all these things could possibly correlate and say that this combination is like works very well when we decide, and accordingly the university may look forward to bringing in more such, the academic institution may look forward to bring in more such students, or more such books, or more such faculty, or the combination of all of these, right? So that is why data should be considered as an enterprise asset. Then in that case, since the data, whatever the example that I gave here, data remains in different places. For example, the data about the faculty and all might lie within each of the departments. The library information may be within the library itself. So how do I correlate all of them, right? So that is where we need to establish a single source of truth. So it is not necessary to bring all the data to a single place, but then they have to be interrelated in some way through some concepts like data lake or data warehouse. And then once you establish the single source of truth, then all your data is in one place, and it will be easy for you to derive the inferences. The third problem that these companies or these organizations tackle is the data cataloging. So what is the meaning of a catalog? Now, if you go to library, you will see a catalog which says, what are the books that are available. So there is an alphabetic listing of the books and the authors. So you can search the library either by the name of the book, or by the name of the author, or even sometimes if we know the publication, then we can look at all the books which are published by a specific publication. So you are cataloging, or you are organizing the data in a certain way and associating a meaning with it. So it is more about data about data. Then you will be able to search for the required data very quickly. So that is the intent of data cataloging. Then if we go ahead, why are we doing all of this, right? You're going to make that data available to different consumers. So there would be a self-service BI, which means I can take out reports associated with my data on my own, right? So that is what is the self-service BI. Then there is the analytics as a service. Like I want to do some deeper analysis. It's not just the question of, what all books are there. Why are these books studied more often? If I want to analyze that kind of a thing, or what would be the book that students will be referring to 2 years down the line, right, for a particular subject. Then those kind of questions and all, if you want to answer, then you will go into a thing called as an analytics as a service. But when you do all of these, we'll have to have a strong data governance. That means I cannot make any data available to anybody. There is some amount of data which is protected, which has to be, there has to be a security associated with it, which is called as an information security or a data security. And that will be the basis for defining what can be shared with whom. Also, whenever there are any computations and all that, we should be able to trace back how was this calculation done? What is the fact behind this kind of a calculation? Or in other words, I should also be able to find data associated with certain results and certain inferences. So sometimes you may have to submit, or very often you may have to submit reports to AICTE and various other university bodies. Then rather than you preparing all of that data and submitting that in the form of a report, what if you make the data as an API, so they can pick up whatever data that is required directly from your data repository. So that is where your data as a service comes into picture. In addition to all of these, since we have been talking about data, the moment we talk of data, we are thinking of something which is tabular in nature. But then human beings don't always look at tabular things. We are using our vision, we are using our hearing to understand certain information. So that is where cognitive capabilities like image processing or speech processing and all of that comes into picture, and how I can add that into the data itself and get a augmented analytics throughout. And finally, any of these data initiatives or analytics initiatives cannot be a very slow driven process. You'll have to churn out the results very, very quickly, or you'll have to achieve the speed to deliver those insights by adopting agile delivery models, right? Now, one point which I have deliberately, kept on the top, which is the monetization of data. Now, having done all of that, can I make money out of data, right? So that is where the monetization of data as a concept comes in. I have a lot of data. I'll be able to churn that. I'll be able to process that. And if I'm able to use this for generating more revenue, more business, or if I'm able to use this for let's say generating more cost savings, right? If I save cost, then I can use the money for doing something more. So with that in mind, there is a question of monetization of data, either more revenue generation or more cost savings. So that is where monetization of data comes into picture. So these are all some of the key characteristics or key elements of a data-driven organization. Now, having said that, what kind of analytics can be done on top of data? Because this topic is about analytics, so we need to talk about analytics in depth, right? Now, the idea of having analytics is to improve decisions. Now, if you look at this value chain, there is data at the base, which is what we talked about a lot. Then where from the data, I am pulling out certain information. That information gets converted into a knowledge based on which there are insights and recommended actions. So actions will be taken up. Based on the decision taken by somebody, there is an action that is going to happen. That's where we call it as recommended actions. Now, when we look at one type of analytics, which is descriptive analytics, merely the question is what happened, right? So if you ask how many students took up computer engineering, right? So then that is a descriptive question. It simply gives you an answer from the data. You are getting an information that 100 students joined out of the 120 seats or something like that, right? Then you go to the next level, which is diagnostic, where you ask another question saying, why did it happen, right? I had 120 seats, but only 100 students have joined. So why did it happen? So then you will need additional information, additional data points to correlate, and then you arrive at a knowledge as to why that kind of a balance of number of seats is there, right? So that diagnostic information you are able to deduce from the data. Then the third level is, okay, this year, this is the trend. Last year, this was the trend. What will happen in future? Next year, what will happen, right? So that is where you will be able to predict that, out of 120 seats, I will be able to consume only 100 seats, or I'll be able to consume or fulfill only 90 seats. So that kind of a prediction will be the next level, where you are also giving analytic insights to the decision maker. And finally, the decision support or the decision automation comes at the topmost level, where you're doing a prescriptive analytics, which means you're saying, what should I do, right? So based on this, that let's say the prediction says only 90 seats will be filled up. So as a prescription, you can say that, use balance 30 seats to open a new unit called computer science and automation or something like that, a combination course, and that will help to bring in more students into the college. So this is the highest level where you are providing more prescriptive. It's like, the doctor giving a prescription or a medicine. You are aiding in the decision support, and sometimes you may even aid in the automation of acting the actual decision itself. So if you look at the business value, when you do only descriptive analysis, your business value is low. But as you go above doing diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive, your business value also goes up and it becomes very high. Another thing that you might have noticed is that when I do analytics, this black colored ones all represents the automatic analytics that is done with the help of a tool. And then there is a manual action or a manual input that happens. So if you're doing only descriptive analytics, then once the output of the descriptive analysis comes, there is a lot of human work or a human input before you go to the level of decision. But as you go higher and higher, the bridge between the action to be taken by the human is very, very less. And at some stage, it becomes completely automated. So, but the end point is that all these types of analytics aim to improve decision-making abilities by the deciding authorities. Now, let's get into some more definitions. Since we first started with a data-driven organization, how do I store data, right? How do I organize that data, or how do I create a data repository? Broadly, there are two terms associated with data repositories. One, a data warehouse. A data warehouse, two, is a data lake. Now, a data warehouse definition looks like this. It is an enterprise-wide integrated repository. Remember, in the first slide, I was talking about, bringing data from academics, the faculty data, students data, library data, all of that into a single repository. So I'm integrating all of that into one single place, and that's why it's an integrated repository. On the other hand, I'm also keeping this data a little bit organized. So I'll have to organize it by subjects. So for example, students is a subject area. Faculty is another subject area. Different books is another subject area. So I will organize that data by different subject areas. What is also important is that, this data contains history. That is, last year, how many students were there, who are there, who were there, who were the faculty who was there in the last academic year, who are the faculty who are there in the current academic year, what kind of books did we buy between last year and this year. So we will have all that history. That's what is called as time variant. And the data is non-volatile, which means, whenever data goes into this data warehouse, it is never deleted. Even if it is deleted, it is only a soft delete, or you're just marking it as deleted. So that way you're keeping the data for many years, and that helps you into doing various kind of analytics in analyzing the trend over the past behaviors, and basis that various decisions can be taken. So this is a broad level definition of a data warehouse. Now, then what is a data lake? A data lake is a recent concept because, for many years, people were building data warehouses, and in some sense, you'll have to study data which is there across the organization, then you have to process it and then bring it into the data warehouse. So the big data concept came in. So then people said, why should I, can I think slightly differently? Can I use a data lake? So in the data lake concept, you're just, storing instances of the various assets. And what is important here is it is a near exact or even exact copy of the source format. So in other words, I'm not actually, defining any data model per se, but I'm quickly copying the data from all the data sources and keeping it in the data lake. As and when more data gets added into the data sources, it could be updated, it could be replaced, all kinds of operations might happen on the source side. But here, when it comes to the data lake, it is essentially appending all of that data as in when newer and newer data comes. What is also interesting to note is that the data lake is a centralized repository to store both structured as well as unstructured data. Now, so far, data warehouse has been more oriented towards holding structured data only. Whereas here, if you remember, we were talking about image files, we were talking about audio files. There could be a lot of information that is available in the form of text files or documents, right? So if I have to store all of them, then the place to store all of them is a data lake. In terms of these two statements, right, data lake and data warehouse, a lot of people get confused, and these two are concepts, big topics by themselves. But at a broad level, if I have to, differentiate between these two, both of them are widely used for storing large volumes of data, but they are not interchangeable. In the sense, data lake is having a lot of raw data, and what am I going to use that raw data for, that may not be defined upfront. Whereas in a data warehouse, I do have a purpose for which the data warehouse is built. It is a structured data, it's already filtered, and it has been defined for a specific purpose. So that way, there is a broad differentiation between a data lake and a data warehouse. Mostly in practical situations, people bring data into a data lake, and then from there, they might take it into a data warehouse and start using it for specific purposes. Now, having understood definitions related to data repository or storage of data, let's also look at certain definitions with respect to data analytics, or using the data or converting the data to information, right? So the data analytics definition says it is the science of analyzing raw data, right? So you have raw data, it could be either in the data lake or it could be in the data warehouse, and then you are processing that raw data, you're transforming that raw data into meaningful information, and then that information can provide you various insights. There are various mechanical processes, there are various algorithms. So you may do some filtering on the data, you may do sorting of data. So whatever you would be teaching as part of data structures and algorithms, you may run past the data into a linked list and do certain linked list operations, whatever, so all those algorithms associated with processing of the data will apply here, and as a result you will get meaningful information, and you may be able to arrive at insights using this data analytics. What is important? Why are we using the term insights? It is for the purpose of those insights will help the decision maker to take operational decisions or analytical decisions. And then they will define their business processes to improve their business outcomes. So for example, a particular consumer brand, right? You may be consuming a certain type of shampoo. Then the other manufacturer may want to improve their business, may want to sell more of their packets of shampoo. Then there could be a there's a crosstalk. Okay, so there could be a, you want to improve the business of your own company, your competitor is ahead of you. Then basis all the data, the analysis, you may make a decision to do more advertisements, to do certain freebies and so on and so forth. And as a result, your business outcome becomes better, or you are able to sell more through your various channels. Right, so effective decision making, and then enhance customer experience. So these are the two major things that you will typically get out of performing analytics. Self-service analytics, as I was highlighting this, is that you don't have to go to the IT department and ask them to prepare reports, perform queries, and all of that. You will be able to do it on your own, even if you are a business user. That is where the question of self-service analytics comes into play. So with that, we have gone through the theory behind what is a data-driven organization. We have gone through data analytics definitions. Let's move into the practical examples of data analytics in various industries. So for going through this topic, I have chosen, 5 different industries. Real estate industry is something, which is very closely associated with all of us. We live in a home, we buy our own homes. We have, some people may have lands and other, properties. We work in a office building or in a university building or an academic building. So that way, real estate industry is something which is very easily understood by everyone. Likewise, if you go into the banking industry, all of us are dealing with banks, either for different types of accounts, savings and other kinds of accounts. We also do loan transactions and all with banks. Again, an easy to understand industry. Construction, we would have seen, a lot of, while going on the road, we would have seen a lot of construction happening on the way. So that is another, industry which can be easily understood. Logistics I have picked up because all of us send couriers and receive couriers, parcels and letters and all of that. So that's another industry. And finally, I've picked up government industry, and specifically I have taken income tax as an example. Every one of us are an income tax payer or do have our PAN card. So it'll be easy for us to associate and understand these examples. Getting into the real estate services, right? Now, if you look at the way this is organized, there are a set of data providers. So data is coming from different types of data sources, and the data itself can be of different types. Once I receive the data, I will do various analysis and derive different kinds of insights, which will then be given to the consumers, who can be either internal clients or external clients. If you look at data providers, the internal data, right? In a real estate company, there will be sales data. So the real estate agent has sold a property, has sold a flat or a independent house or a land. All this kind of things are sales data. So when you look at that, whose property was that? When was it sold? At what price was it sold? What was the area of coverage? All of that details are there in the sales data. So that is one type of data that comes in. The real estate company can also be doing some leasing business, right? So you have given an office space for a particular company to run their office on lease for 5 years or whatever, for a particular tenure. Or an agricultural land has been given on lease for a specific time frame, and the farmer is actually using that land in that tenure, right? So there are all kinds of leasing information, like who is the leaser, who is the leasee, how many years of lease is it, and what is the price at which the lease has been agreed upon. All these kind of data would come in. Then thirdly, there could be a large residential apartment where the builder or the real estate company itself is providing various services like, car parking, maintaining the car park, maintaining the security services, maintaining CCTV cameras, and so on and so forth. So that could be different types of asset services. And then there could be other kinds of, market data, which means, somebody in the real estate company comes back and says, I'm seeing good market there in certain parts of Chennai or certain parts of Tiruchi and so on and so forth. So that comes as a market data. Or somebody else may also be going and collecting certain competitor data that, some other real estate company is doing better than ours. There could also be some third-party data, which means, you have a guideline value which is published by the government or, different kinds of external data as well. If you look at this data, you'll then classify that into different types. One is a master data, where it is absolute terms like, customer data or the asset data. So the customer data could be an occupier, it could be a tenant owner. So the name of the person, address of the person, age of the person, those kind of things will form part of the master data. When you come, when it is about the asset data, it is the buildings and lands. So the address of the building, the square area of the building. So these are all master data. It will never change, right? When you talk about transaction data, you're talking of occupancy. So the tenant is occupying the building for since so and so date, and will be occupying the building only for this period, right? So that is what is your occupancy data. Likewise, there could be lease data, like the lease started on so and so date, and the lease tenure is 5 years, 3 years, whatever. And then there could be different kinds of transactions associated with it, right? There was a broker commission given, so sales transactions like that. When you talk about external data, you may be buying data from different third-party data providers, or you may be looking at survey data and research data and all of that, right? Now, when you get all these data, so typically you will store that into your data lake or your data warehouse. You will perform various analysis actions. You may aggregate the data, you may compare data, you may do some predictions, you may do simulations. That is, what if I sell this plot at this much value, this much percentage? Will I be more profitable as compared to selling it at a later date at the same percentage? Those kind of what if analysis is what is called as simulation. As a result of it, what you get is the various insights. There could be different kinds of trend reports. There could be also specific purpose reports. When we talk of trend reports, it could be growth trends. What has happened on over a period of time, month on month, how it has been improving, the sales has been improving or not. What is the new business segments? So suppose I'm selling a particular plot, only a particular flat only for house owners, or am I also taking the flats for business purposes? That kind of analysis over a period of time, the various trends. Then when I talk about specific purpose reports, those could be deal specific reports, right? Where the broker or the salesperson who is doing the deal wants to know more and more details of various comparisons. How many flats have been sold in a huge apartment? Those kind of deal specific reports. So all of these are then consumed either by internal clients. So in this case, the real estate services company has various employees at different levels, and the managers, the brokers, all of them may be consuming these reports, or it could also be given to end customers like you and I, who are actually going and buying those properties, or are looking forward to buying property, or looking forward to renting out property, and so on and so forth. So that's how the value chain runs from data to insights. Let's look at how a dashboard on this kind of a real estate scenario would look like if I'm doing a customer analytics. So this dashboard has been prepared by having data in the backend, a huge volume of data. One analysis tells me that if I categorize the male and female customers, 51% of my customers are all male members and only 49% are female. So the ratio is a little skewed. When I look at the highest band in which the purchase is happening, that is the 40%, is in the age group of 36 years to 50 years. That is where most of the purchases are happening. And 40% of this 36 to 50 year bracket, 40% of them are male members. On the female side, this is only 34%, because there are people who are even in the age bracket of 21 to 35, they are also buying more as compared to the male members in the same age bracket. So these kind of comparisons you are able to make. It's a simple stacked bar that we have used. And two different colors is also denoting the difference between the two different genders. Then when I go into analyzing, let's say, in terms of the marital status, so there are about 45% of the people who are married people who are actually doing these kind of purchases. So that's another inference that we get. Then next level, if we analyze, then based on the education background, those who have those who are graduates, that is 35% of the graduates who are doing this real estate transactions, and so on and so forth. The income bracket and the tenure of employment, various analysis are done. Here you also have a user selection, which means, you know, I have selected for male, and then I'm able to get some more details around, you know, customer churn for male customers. Since I have selected male and married, so the inference is that out of 60% who have churned, churn means people have left your company, like they are not doing repeat business with your company. So out of the 60% of churned male customers, based on their marital status, 15% of the married are getting churned, which means these married people are going and buying property from other you know, customers, other sellers. Maybe it has got to do something with their you know, marital status also. So we'll have to, if we have to retain our customers, then this real estate company has to do something. So this kind of customer analysis helps them to take a decision to how do I not allow any customer to churn out of my real estate company. Like if he is a tenant, I want him to continue to be my tenant. If he is bought some property, I want, through him, I want to do more and more business. If he is a lease occupier, then I would want that you know, lease to be extended beyond. Right. So these are all the things that as a real estate company I would want to do. And in order to take a right decision, what should I do with that male customers? You know, I will have to do certain campaigns and get those male customers coming back to me more and more as a company, right? So this is what is the inference out of this dashboard. Now, if you look at this dashboard, it has almost on the top you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in the bottom you have 2, 5, 7 you know, widgets are presented here. So there are bar charts or stacked bars, and then there are horizontal bars and various pie charts that are used to represent, or these are the visual widgets that have been used to represent the information. And since it is visually appealing, you are able to get a grasp of this dashboard very, very quickly. This has been built using MicroStrategy, which is a BI technology, one of the early technologies which made mobile BI possible. You know, there are different types of BI technologies. We will go through them one by one in different examples. So this one is built using MicroStrategy. The next example that I have is on the banking sector, right? We all go to the bank, or we may be doing online transactions also. And when we do any banking transaction, we may be either getting into, you know, depositing money, which is into our savings account or fixed deposits and so on. Or we may be also going for a loan. We may be taking a personal loan. We may be taking a home loan or jewel loan. You know, those kind of different types of loans are possible. And thirdly, we may be also transacting with the bank by taking credit cards, right? So these are all called as products in the banking terminology. There are different banking products that they sell. Now, typically in India, these banks are divided into different zones: north, south, east, and west. If you look at this outer dashboard, this one is meant for the overall manager at the India country level. So this manager is looking at the profitability analysis. What is the meaning of profitability, right? If a customer is taking liability products, right? So they classify the products as asset products and liability products. Those which are like, you know, the home loan and personal loan and all of these are the ones where the customer is paying interest. So which means you are generating more money for the bank. So these are all asset products. Whereas if you're doing more and more of savings account and or the fixed deposit and all that, you are liable to pay to your customer. You give your interest to the customer. So these are all liability products. Now the profitability will depend on how much money you are making out of the customers themselves. That means if you do more loan products, your customers will pay more interest, and therefore you will become more and more profitable. That is how this is defined. Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. So when we look at the asset products, right, based on the more higher sales of the asset products, you will be making more profit to the bank itself. So the manager at the topmost, he is able to see north, south, east, and west zones in terms of their budget versus actuals. If you look at this kind of a widget, we have chosen a dial kind of a widget. It says that the total budget is 122 lakhs, out of which the north zone has made 50 lakhs. Whereas if you look at the south zone, their budget is only 97,000, out of which they have made 47,000, right? So in terms of the percentages, if the same thing is plotted, there is also certain amount of percentages that is derived. These numbers may not directly correlate. This is only a sample that is given here. You also do next level of analysis wherein you analyze by the product, right? Out of the asset products, there's a personal loan, credit card, home mortgage. So which one is doing pretty well in this particular bank? That analysis is done. And since home mortgage is less, probably you do some home loan drives where you try to bring more and more home loan customers. Maybe do a tie-up with a real estate company, which we were seeing in the previous slide, and increase the number of home loans. So that way, that product can also increase in this particular bank. So this analysis, if you look at it, there is a username at the top. So which means a particular user, when he logs in, he will be able to see the data relevant to his particular data security. If there is a north zone manager who enters right into the system, he may not be able to see the east, west, south, and all of these zones. He will be able to see the north zone dial, and he will be able to see the profitability by product, which is for his particular zone. So there is a security associated or a data security associated with all these dashboards that are being built. When you go to the more detailed level, that is at a branch level, right? So you are drilling through to a branch level. The branch manager does not have to see according to the zone and all. So this North Zone New Delhi branch manager, when he goes to his screen, he will be able to see certain more details, which says, who are his top 3 customers, who are the bottom 3 customers. Now the decision making that he can do is, these are bottom 3 customers. I can decide to bring some more new customers. Even if these 3 customers churn out, I don't have a problem. But instead of them, I will bring somebody else who can give me more profit, right? That kind of an analysis this New Delhi branch manager can do. And he also is able to see in terms of how much profit these people are giving. That gives him a little more insights to take decisions. Right. So the inferences that we have from this dashboard is that, we have used again different types of widgets. We have used dial, we have used a donut chart, we have used horizontal bar. We also have a tabular report. And then we have used certain written blue kind of combination to indicate or alert different users in terms of what could be problem areas or what are good areas and all that. We also talked about the user security. User can log in and he will be able to see only his data relevant to his particular jurisdiction. So this is how, when you design a dashboard, these are all certain things that you need to keep in mind, specifically the user security and the different types of information that is relevant to a particular user. This dashboard is built using Power BI, which is a Microsoft BI product, right? So the earlier one was MicroStrategy. This one is Power BI. Let me go on to the next one. This one is done for a equipment at a construction site. Right? Now, if you see here, the dashboard title says it's an asset insights utilization dashboard, asset insights and utilization dashboard. Now, what has happened here is, if you have noticed various construction sites, there'll be huge cranes, tower cranes that are very, very large. There'll be large earth movers or excavators which are digging on the ground. Then there will be various trucks which are carrying all the material. There'll be concrete mixers. So all these equipment are deployed in project sites. And these equipment are very, very costly. If they consume a lot of fuel, then your operating cost also becomes very, very high. So the construction company has to be careful not to spend too much money in the fuel and all that. So that's where they will constantly look at whether the equipment is utilized and whether there is the fuel consumption is good, ugly, or bad. Right? So that is where here what we have done is we have connected these equipment using IoT sensors. So if you see, because of these IoT sensors, you are able to see that 188 devices or equipment are connected. There is nothing which is not connected. And out of that 188, there are certain devices which are reporting, which means, there is data coming from them, but some are broken, which means they are not reporting. Then the other thing that you are also able to see here is that, out of the 107, there are 30 of them which are on and 77 are off. This gives you at any particular point of time a visibility into what is happening in the various construction sites. Also what you are seeing is, in a map widget, you're able to see the various sites where these equipment are plotted, and depending on the user security, which is not captured in the screen, but there is a user security in this dashboard also. So if a site engineer or a site manager of a particular site in Chennai logs in, he will only be able to see the Chennai map, and more particularly, he'll be able to see his own site and the equipment that are deployed in his own site. The other thing that you're seeing here is the working hours versus fuel consumption. So this is a bubble chart. This widget is called as a bubble chart, right? Now, why is it called? Because there are a lot of bubbles of information that you are able to see in this chart. Now, in addition to the two dimensions, which is the fuel consumption and the working hours, there is also a lot of information that is hidden within this bubble itself, right? Now, one thing which you're noticing is that, the bubble color is two or three different colors are used to depict the bubbles. Red color means there is a problem with that particular equipment. A green color means that equipment is doing well, right? So each bubble represents different equipment. A red one is not good. A green one is good, right? So that is one thing which you are directly inferring visually. Then second is the size, right? So size is very large here. There are some small red bubbles also here. So out of the bad behaving assets, this one is very bad, whereas these are okay type of assets, right? Likewise, the green also you can compare. The bigger greens represents that it is doing well, and the smaller greens represents that it is okay types, right? What are the inferences? As and when you consume more and more fuel, but you are able to work only for less number of hours. So that is what this red bubble means. That means the equipment is probably faulty, it needs a repair, and even though it is consuming more fuel, it is working only for less number of hours. So better to repair it and then deploy it in the project site. Right? This one is consuming as per its rated capacity and working for 6 hours. So this equipment seems to be doing well. So this kind of inference comes, and the efficiency of the project also depends on how well the equipment is performing. And associated with that, there are also various alerts that get generated. And these alerts are able to give you descriptive information in terms of what action, prescriptive information in terms of what action that a user, that the site engineer has to take. This dashboard is built using a combination of Power BI and Microsoft SSRS, SQL Server reporting services. So if you look at this one, key inferences, we have used certain type of, widgets, which is only showing one number or one or two numbers. These are all like, text widgets. And then we have also used a map widget and a bubble chart. So again, if you look at it from the previous slides, we started in one slide, we had the, bar charts and pie charts. In the other one, we had dials, donuts, list reports or a tabular report. And here we have text widgets, and we have map widget and the bubble widget. So depending on the requirement, you can choose different type of visual widgets. Of course, I'll talk about certain best practices of what to choose as a type of widget. What widget will be more suitable in a particular situation later on. Another example is in the logistics industry, like how our courier, happens, where you give a courier in a particular courier shop, and then it all, a van comes and collects it, and then your courier travels all the way through air or through train, and then it goes to the recipient city, and then in the recipient city again, there is a van which collects it and then delivers it at a particular address, right? So logistics is typically the end-to-end handling of the material, right? Here we have taken we have done a similar work at from a mines to the port, right? So minerals are mined at a mines, and then it goes all the way to the seaport. From there, it is exported to other countries. Now, what you see here is, analysis of a specific type of equipment. There is a grabber. The grabber is equipment which is picking up the mined mineral from the mine and puts it into the truck, right? So it is like that kind of a device. Now I want to analyze that specific device, how well it is working. So I'm an engineering manager, so therefore I'm looking at all of these. Similar to the previous one, here also the status is, it is connected. This equipment is connected through a IoT sensor. Few things, the grabber has been given an asset ID. So at any given point of time, you will be able to refer to it with this asset ID, and you will be able to know how many hours it has worked so far, how much quantity of load it has handled, and how it has been utilized. So utilization is only 26.52. That means there is a problem here, right? Also, you have a date slider out here. There is a date slider. So this date slider shows that, I'll be able to slide and see a particular period of time to measure the utilization. Right now we are seeing in the month of July, July 1st to to December 29th. So for this period, the utilization has been only 26.52. Also, month-on-month analysis is available, which says, number of days that this equipment has been operational. So in the month of July, this equipment has been used for 20 days for a particular type of customer, another 20 days, working days for another customer called City. Of course, you will question why there are 40 days. So that means there is a problem with the data itself, right? That could be a reason. And then the next thing is number of days operational. So if the equipment has worked only for 20 days, let's say it is shared between these two customers, so which means it is only used for 64% of the time. What has happened to the remaining 10 days? Why is it not used for the next 10 days? So that kind of analysis somebody can do at the next level. Then there are various other, metrics that are associated with the utilization of this equipment. So each of them are depicted in the form of horizontal bars, different KPIs or metrics, key performance indicators or metrics which are useful for the engineering manager are all depicted in this dashboard. And then on top of it, you are also able to see certain area chart, which says, you know, how much time that the equipment has been working versus the time that it has been idle. So the working time to idle time, you are able to easily look at it. Now, if you look at this tall, you know, bar, you're able to say almost, you know, 50% of the time only it has been working and 50% of the time it was idle. So that gives you an inference that sometimes the grabber is not working. You will be able to also see why it is not working adequately. And then there is a third metric which we are measuring here, which is the quantity. So for working for so many hours, this tall bar, which we were looking at it, for even after working for so many hours, it has only handled less quantity. So you can analyze why it has, you know, handled less quantity of mineral. Maybe the mineral was not mined adequately, or the grabber's bucket was very loose and it dropped all the mineral. It did not handle the required quantity of mineral. Those kind of inferences come up. So the conclusion on this slide is that, you know, in addition to the horizontal bars and all that, we have also seen usage of line charts, the bar and line combination, like here. You have been able to see a date slider, which is a parameter controller. You are also able to see a filter. So this filter, if I want to analyze another grabber, then I can filter that grabber's number, the asset ID, and you will be able to see the performance of that other grabber. Similarly, you are analyzing how much is used for the export purposes. If something is imported and this equipment is used for the import purposes, you will be able to analyze that also. So there are multiple widgets that have been used: filters, date slider, line charts, area charts, all of this in this particular dashboard. And this dashboard is built using Tableau. Right, so you will be going through the rest of the sessions on Tableau at length. So probably end of the session, you may be able to build a dashboard, something like this. Right, and the other term that I referred to in this particular example is the key performance indicator, or a KPI, or a metric. So which is an important measurement metric that is used by the decision maker when they are working on the ground. With that, I'm moving to the last example, which is the example of an income tax department. Right. Recently, Prime Minister Modi has announced that the income taxes department is going into a faceless scrutiny. Right. You don't need to know which income tax officer is handling that particular scrutiny case, but you will be able to answer online various queries associated with your income tax statement, and basis that the scrutiny happens, right? So these are all, you know, very, very advanced things that is being done by the various Digital India initiatives. This particular example, if you look at it, there is an entity, a PAN holder, who goes to a jewelry shop and does some purchase. So when you do that purchase, you're giving your PAN details. Then regular basis, the jewelry shop has to report to the income tax department. They have to tell this PAN holder has spent this much money in the shop. Another thing is the tour operators. Of course, now with COVID, there is not much of tour happening. Probably, you know, the hospital expenses and things like that could also be there. That's another, you know, information that comes to the department. Here, the mobile number is coming as an input to the income tax department. Then there is a third you know, information where somebody goes and stays in a luxury hotel and provides details about the mobile number. So that also goes into the income tax department. And finally, when this entity, the PAN holder, files the income tax department, files the income tax report, the department compares all these reports received from the jewelry shop, tour operators, and the hotel, and all of that. And then when they compare, what they arrive at is the income versus expense. So a person who is showing less income and is able to spend more money, that means there is a discrepancy. There is a problem in their spend pattern, which means the person is underreporting income, or it's a fraudulent case that this individual is doing. So you're linking the mobile number, you're linking the PAN number, all of that to the income tax return. And as a result, you're able to identify and alert the department that this is a case of underreporting of income. And therefore, then the department may put up a query, send you an SMS saying, you know, there's an expense, did you do that expense, right? And then basis that you may reply back, and you may do a refiling, or you may correct your income taxes. So this typically happens with people who are ignorant, who don't know how to file their returns, or it may also happen with people who find ways and means of tax avoidance. So that is where this key initiative is happening with the income tax department, where they are using visualization and techniques like this to avoid underreporting or any kind of tax evasion. What you see here is a GIS dashboard, which is built using a geographical information system map widget, right? So this is built using a technology called as ESRI. What has been plotted in this chart is all the income tax payers who belong to a particular region. And then there is this yellow caution symbol, which says that they are not paid income, or they have not filed their returns. If you look at this red color, area, you're seeing that, it's a very highly concentrated. There are a lot of taxpayers in that particular area, and quite a few of them have not paid their or have not filed their returns. And you're also able to see certain income taxpayers shown in red color, right? So what is the inference of that? So what has happened in this dashboard is that, the PAN holders are there, their power consumption is looked at. A guy who is having a low income cannot be spending more money on electricity, right? So if he's spending more money on electricity, then obviously there is something fishy. He is probably, not paying the right electricity charges. Maybe he's consuming an industry, he's running an industry, but paying taxes or paying things like as though he is an individual. So that kind of discrepancies could be there. And then, you are able to see those kind of problem areas, or you are able to alert the income tax officer about these kind of anomalies. And then when you hover your mouse, you also get a pop-up or a tooltip, and that tooltip gives you more details about what is the name of the income taxpayer, what is the PAN number, and and whether they have defaulted or they are genuine. Those kind of more details are also available in the form of a tooltip, right? So this gives the income tax officer whom to put up for scrutiny, because it is not, only if there is a problem, then you go and scrutinize and get more details and help the income taxpayer to pay the right taxes and do the right filing at the right time. And also any kind of tax evasion, right, tax avoidance that happens, that also can be prevented by having this kind of geographic dashboard, right, or a map widget. So to summarize, we have seen different types of widgets in these examples. In a dashboard, there can be multiple widgets. There can be bar charts, pie charts, horizontal bars, dials, donuts, tabular reports, map widgets, bubble charts, area charts and line charts, and then different controls to filter different sliders. And then we saw about, map widgets and tooltips. We also saw that, there is a user security or a data security that is associated to authenticate the user and to authorize them to view a particular type of data. So this is in essence, the practical examples or the practical applications of data analytics in various industries. Let me move on to the third topic, which is the architecture and best practices. So far, we have seen certain definitions. We have seen the practical examples. Now we need to see, how do I construct, right? What do people in the IT industry do to produce these dashboards, to produce these visualizations, and so on and so forth. That is what is going to be talked about in this topic. What you see here is a reference architecture by TDWI, the Data Warehousing Institute. So if you're keen on getting to know more on data analytics, you may register into the Data Warehouse Institute. There are a lot of course material that is there in this TDWI, which talks about fundamentals of data warehousing, and it also talks about practical uses of data warehouse. Now here, what you see is the different types of data that we have been talking about. There is a lot of traditional data, which could be billing data, which could be operations data, call center data, and so on and so forth, which is available in the form of CRM, ERP. These kind of systems are supplying this data. They are mostly structured data. We also saw in our examples, there is a lot of data that is coming from newer types of sources. So it could be your machine data. I was talking about the tower crane. I was talking about a grabber, data coming from such machines. Or it could be mobile data. It could be social media data. So all of these comes into use when you create a data analytics solution. There are different ways by which data can be ingested. Data can land in a landing area and then it can be cleaned and then used further. There could be types of processing, extract, transform, and load, or extract, load, and transform kind of processing. When there is a data which is continuously coming, then you capture it as a streaming data using some message queues and all of that. Or if there is data that is only happening when an event happens, right? For example, if you go to the ATM and you're withdrawing money, so immediately that's the event that has happened, and then you capture the data at that point of time, right? So that is your complex event processing. So different types of ingestion methods exist, and then the data gets into a data lake, which will be a massive store of raw source data. In the data lake itself, you may perform certain algorithmic analytics, and the result of analytics can also be stored in the data lake. And thirdly, you may also classify the data according to the different data domains and store them. Right? Marketing data can be there, sales data can be there, faculty data can be there, library data can be there. So you may also departmentalize or have different data domains and keep the data organized in a good manner. Then when it comes to delivery, you take that data and keep it in a core data warehouse, which is organized by dimensions. And then it is having all the history. Different metrics are pre-calculated and then kept ready for providing the various reports, dashboards. There could be, set or a tabular analysis also, which means, you may do certain SQL, PL SQL kind of code as well. And pre-calculate and keep the data ready in the form of materialized view kind of a thing. There are also certain specialized DBMSs that can be used, which means, if there is a interconnected data, then you would use probably a graph data, which means, you are analyzing things like friend of friend, network associations, and so on and so forth. Or you might set up an analytics sandbox where you are experimenting on a smaller subset of data. So this is how data will go to a layer where it is then ready for placing a visualization tool on top of it and analyzing further. Across the systems, there could be integration using data integration techniques. Various metadata or data catalog gets created. Different queries and virtualization can also be put in place, like the example of materialized view. There can be diverse system platforms. That means you may implement this data warehouse using a client server architecture. You could be doing it with a web server, so that you will be able to deploy it with a thin client itself. And then in terms of the server, there could be clusters, racks, and grids. This can be implemented both on-premise or on cloud as well. That's where you have the hybrid combinations. So the architecture is one layer where you are actually assembling various components of the solution and then creating a solution architecture for holding the data and then making it available for various analytics. Using the principles of the reference architecture, a technical architecture would look like this. This is an example of how it is done for a bank. Right? So the bank will have systems of records from core banking system or a treasury system or a overseas operations system, reconciliation systems and so on. There could be data coming from card. As you use the card, the data comes immediately, or various social media data also can be coming into the bank, so which can be ingested using API techniques as well. So ingestion methods can be either batch or API. The data goes into the raw layer from the ingestion layer, and then various data quality programs are run on top of this raw data layer to arrive at a processed data. So this processed data will be a clean data. It doesn't have any data quality issues. Then it goes into a data integration tool where different computations or transformations are performed, and that processed data goes into an analytical layer. After it goes into the analytical layer, the data may be provided either in the form of data as a service or in the form of analytics as a service. When you say data as a service, you are just merely giving the raw data in a slightly processed form for the consuming user. Whereas when you say analytics as a service, you are also doing certain value adds. You are aggregating the data, you're simulating, doing some what if analysis, those kind of things, and it becomes an analytics as a service, right? The user layer or the consumption layer could be different downstream applications also, or it could be regulators. So in your case, right, in the case of academics, you may be sending data to AICTE. So your regulator is receiving data or the analytics from you. You may be doing certain campaigns. There may be certain business partners and external agencies with whom you are going to share the data. So all of these are in the consuming layer. And then different users like business users, analytics users are there in the entire ecosystem. In this particular banking example, Power BI is used as a BI or a query tool. As you can see, we crossed multiple layers, right from sources to the acquisition to data engines, where the actual processing is happening, the consumption layer, and then the end user who is outside of the system. There is a lineage as the data goes from one end to another. There is a lineage that needs to be established, that so-and-so data has come and data will be audited to say that, these many records came, these many records got processed, and this is available for output generation. And I have been talking a lot about security and governance. So making the right data available to the right person at the right time is important. As the data gets older, you may also store it in an archival layer, which means it is there for future purposes. The essence that we need to carry out of this diagram of this architecture is that analytics is closer to business users. But then even before coming to analytics, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, which is called as data engineering. You perform data engineering, you prepare the data, and then make it available for the analytics consumers. So let's see now, having built such a data architecture, what are the best practices in data visualization, right? So let's see these 10 points here. Point number 1, we need to decide the audience. If you remember, when I was talking about the banking example, I was talking about the overall manager, the country manager of the bank, right? In that bank, there may be a few lakhs or even a few crores of users. If I give a simple report, a tabular report to that overall country manager, right? 1 crore records, a report, that report will itself be looking like a big book, right? So that is not what I should be giving to the overall country manager. Rather, the dashboards should be simple. It should have things like north, south, east, and west. So the zones which come under the country manager. Whereas for the branch manager, you need to give him a little more details. So decide the audience, and based on the audience, define what should be there in the content of the dashboard or the visualization. Point number 2, include the context, right? If you had noticed in all the examples that we saw, right? Even in the logistics example, it was titled as Sennabogan grabber analysis. In the construction example, it was called as, asset insights and asset utilization. In the real estate example, we saw that customer analytics. So there was a title of that overall dashboard, and then every chart had a label. So the x-axis talked about fuel consumption, the right, the y-axis was talking about, the number of working hours. So there were labels, there were captions. So that gives you a context of what you are visualizing. Third, you have to choose the appropriate chart, right? Wherever you have a line, a straight line, you want to, some linear progression happens, then better to choose a line chart. Whereas if you're comparing multiple entities, then you can use a bar chart. If you're going to talk about, something which is voluminous, you may use an area chart. You may use a bubble chart. We talked about bubble chart. We talked about the map widget. So the appropriate chart type has to be selected and used based on the business context. The fourth one is important. When you look at any dashboard or when you look at this slide, for example, we are reading from left to right and then we are reading from top to bottom. So the reading order and the flow should be maintained with respect to the natural tendency by which we are reading content in any text documents. So that is important. And wherever possible, we should have adequate white spaces for demarcation. If the dashboard is having too many widgets and too many graphs and you're packing them all close to each other, the information will not be very easy to consume. So you put in a lot of white spaces in between, so it will be easy to logical to look at. And then also choice of the font size is important. You have to choose a font size which is readable for the consumer. The next point is about usage of effective colors. In many places, if you noticed in the dashboards that I showed you, we were using colors like red and green. Wherever red is going to show an alerting kind of a thing, and then green is showing something which is good. So you're emphasizing on key points, you're alerting on certain things. And then the colors also will give you an aesthetic sense that it is looking good. The visualization should look good. There should be adequate tooltips, right? Pop-up information. If remember, just imagine the previous map that I was showing where there was a pop-up, right? So if this pop-up was not there, and instead I am showing all this detail in all the points that are plotted in this map, how cluttered it will look like, right? So that is where it is important to have pop-ups or tooltips which will help to avoid clutter. Then the type of device, right? So the dashboard size must be defined based on the type of device. Many times these BI tools that we are having, the BI tools are inherently capable of adjusting themselves to the type of device, or in other words, it is called as a responsive design. So they will automatically adjust, but in case you are designing some properties or some widgets specific to a device, just keep that in mind that it should be able to work in any type of device. Then we also saw various filters, radio buttons and hyperlinks, which will help you to analyze and do a deeper analysis and have a self-service capability. For example, in the case of the customer analytics, we had seen that the customers were there were a lot of filters available where you can filter for the gender, the educational qualification, the income bracket, the age bracket, and so on and so forth. So all these filters will help you to reduce the data and see for yourself what is the result of that. So up to this point, 1 to 8 is related to what the user sees in the front end. But in the back end also, there are certain things that need to be done, which is what is your 9 and 10. When the query is submitted or when the user is interacting on the dashboard, it should not take 5 minutes to refresh the data. Then nobody will use this kind of a dashboard. So the response time should be excellent. And then the last but not the least is that the data security data should be having the right security controls. So this is a point that I have been emphasizing in multiple places in this entire presentation. We have to help the user to view the right data that and the right user to should be viewing it. The branch manager cannot view what is happening at the country level, and the country manager should not be given what is happening at a particular branch, right? So the data security controls should be appropriately set up like this. Having said about these best practices in data visualization, let me introduce you to the father of data visualization. So Stephen Few. This gentleman is a thought leader, and he has done, he has his own blog where he is talking about different principles and best practices of data visualization. And specifically, you could go through this website. There is also a book which is Information Dashboard Design, Effective Visual Communication of Data. So you may refer to this book, and if you find it useful, you can order it for your library as well. This will be a very good reading material to understand more about visualization. Tableau, what you're going to study, is only a tool. But in our examples, we talked about multiple such tools. We talked about MicroStrategy, we talked about Power BI, we talked about Click, we talked about Tableau, and there are various other visualization, business objects, Cognos. These are all different visualization tools that you will learn in the next few days. But then, whatever be the tool that you are using, finally it is visual business intelligence. How do I communicate through visuals? How do I communicate data through visuals? So that is what you have to learn. You can go through this material by Stephen Few. And what are we doing at LTI? So we have adopted four key strategies to help enterprises or organizations break away in the digital era. So every company, even the government, everybody is adopting digitalization. So that is where what we are trying to do is, number one, we are trying to use data analytics in the operations. We are trying to use artificial intelligence in operations of a company. And as a result, the money that is saved in those operations cost is funneled into newer and newer transformation initiatives. We are helping to build data-driven organizations, which means wherever there is data, like the example of the income tax department, we are helping to use that data. We are helping them to use that data more and more. And as a result, a lot of decisions are automated like the way we saw different type of analytics. The third thing is digitizing the core, which means, it's not just the structured data that we have been talking about. There is a lot of data that is available in the unstructured format, be it PDF or text documents, be it image files, and so on and so forth, or audio files. So taking that data also will actually help in digitizing the entire core and use all of that data. And finally, there are transforming the experiences, which is where the entire visualization or whatever, the visual communication comes into picture. And that is being used to give an enhanced experience to the customers. And thereby, all of these put together is helping companies to amplify their business outcomes. And therefore, they break away in the digital era. And on top of all of this, we also have built our own Mosaic ecosystem, which is a solution suite with which we harvest knowledge and use that for more and more digital transformations across various other companies. So this is how we are doing at LTI. We are running multiple prestigious programs for the Government of India. The Income Tax Department was one example that I talked to you about. A couple of days back, there was also a news item on Economic Times. We are building a solution for establishing the digital repository for the country, which we are working with the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So all of these are digital initiatives. which are actually helping the country grow much more and be ahead of various other countries in the globe. Right. So with that, I come to the end of this session. We had started with definitions of what is a data-driven organization. We talked about various practical examples of data analytics. And then finally, we saw the architecture and best practices. The recommended book of Stephen Few is something which you can refer to get to know more about this theory behind data visualization. And wish you a happy going through the rest of the sessions in this whole curriculum. Thank you.
Participants, do you have any questions? Ma'am, one of our participants, Ms. Shailaja, was asking that what is mobile data?
Mobile BI. I mentioned mobile BI. So whenever your reports, see all these reports that we were seeing, if you are able to see the same reports on a mobile, right? Just imagine this is a Tableau report or a Tableau dashboard. If this is made visible on a mobile, that is called as mobile BI, right? But just imagine, can this whole thing come on a single page on your mobile? Will anything be meaningful? Right? So that is where when you design a BI report or a visualization for your mobile device, then the app will be defined slightly differently. You may not show all the 8 widgets in one single page. You may show only one of them in a one single page or 2 of them in a single page just for quick consumption, and then you have multiple pages to show each of them. So then it will become easier for the user to look at and consume the information.
Ma'am, Ms. Suhasini is asking, any good book for data analytics?
Data analytics, the book by Ralph Kimball, R-A-L-P-H, Ralph Kimball, Kimball. That is a good one. Also, there's a book by Bill Inmon, B-I-L-L, Bill I-N-M-O-N, Inmon. Bill Inmon is supposed to be the father of data warehousing. He has authored a number of books. So definitely his books are good. And Ralph Kimball has introduced a concept called as dimension modeling. And he also has authored a number of books. So all of these can be referred.
Ma'am, Dr. Sudha Rajesh is asking, can you suggest any tools used to implement big data analytics other than R?
R is only at the end of the value chain. If you see this picture, so there are various tools that are used. So from a data layer perspective, typically it is a Hadoop data lake. Hadoop is used here. And within Hadoop, there is a HDFS, which is for storing all the unstructured data. And then there is Hive, which is for storing all the structured data. R comes in this layer where you are providing analytics.
స్టార్ట్ అయ్యి 1 వీక్ అయింది. ఊరుకోండి సార్, మీ ఇష్టం. నేను ఏమన్నా మీరు మీకు బాధ అనిపిస్తుంది. నేను
Other than R, you can also use Python for performing those analytics. But for processing all of this data which is stored in your HDFS or Hive, you can go for Spark programming.
Participants, do you have any more questions? No more questions, ma'am. That was a brilliant session, ma'am. The way you explained the concept of data analytics with its practical example was meritorious. Thank you so much for the most inspiring and interesting session, ma'am.
Thank you.